All right, we're here at Ebisu Circuit on Nishi with Robbie Nishida. Last year we did a really good interview, and we're gonna kind of follow up on that because we talked about the future of drifting, the past of drifting, all kinds of stuff with him. And I just wanted to check in because it was a fantastic episode. The audience, you guys really liked it and stuff, so I just wanted to keep going. So, real quickly, introduce yourself again.
Hi, I'm an old dude who used to drift professionally before, Robbie Nishida. Then I run into Aaron every time I come to a Matsuri event, like this time.
So, Robbie's probably very humble and he didn't introduce himself quite well enough. He's one of the best drivers in the world. He drifted in Formula D, D1. He's shaking his head no. No, he's really good. He was teammates with Daigo for years. What are some other highlights? You were on Team Falcon for a long time, weren't you? Did some
Yeah,
cool
I went to
stuff
the
with that.
States, then got into FD, did well in the first event, and then I was with Falcon for a little bit, and then we went to Hankook. Then I drove many GTRs. I drove first GTR, Hankook GTR, didn't work so well.
Yeah.
And then I drove another GTR in Japan that a Japanese shop built.
A drifting GTR, not like a
drifting
road racing.
GTR, yeah. Then I drove the other J-Yang racing one at the last year for my pro career, yeah.
I want to give a huge shout out to What Monsters Do for making our Japanese content possible, and Inky Wheels. If it was not for them, because this content is so expensive to do in Japan, we would not be able to do it. Thank you so very much. Go to their website, buy some merchandise. Here's a discount code for 20% off so you can save some money. It's Ebisu.
So he has done a ton of stuff, but at the same time, he's super laid back, grassroots guy that we had great conversations last year about, they used to blow up 1Js, they were worthless, they were doing all different kinds of things in Japan. We're just going to kind of dance around and do the same thing this time of just asking questions and stuff. And he's coming to Ebisu to continue drifting and stuff. And we're talking about what is his future car, what's going to be the next thing that's cheap. And you brought an Altezza with they have no power basically, right?
Yeah.
It's a Beams 2-liter?
Yeah, I just bought this thing a few days ago. I just went to pick it up. It's registered. It's street legal. I drove it up here. Well, it was like a stance car. So it was like, slammed and crazy camber and stuff. So I just changed all that out, raised it a little bit, drove it up here, and it's got a torsion diff in it, coilovers. I put little washers for the steering and aired the crap out of the rear tires. Boom, it drifts, so.
How well does it drift? Like as well as a JZX90 or 100?
It feels good. It's just,
Yeah.
Obviously, if you have more power, it would be nice. But I don't have a seat in it or nothing, and my knees kind of hurt from bouncing around and stuff. But
You hold yourself in on the center console?
Yeah.
So is it as good, could they have 100 of these here and everybody really enjoys driving them at like North Course and Minami and all these tracks? Or is it underpowered or is it fantastic?
It's underpowered the way it is, but I kind of see it where in the US, the IS300s are kind of coming up right now. And I actually didn't really care for this car that much, but some of my friends in the US started to pick them up. And I'm like, oh, this would be kind of a cool car, So it's almost like a American JZX, but it's got shorter wheelbase. The rear suspension is a little different designed, but the front suspension is all exactly the same as the JZX90, JZX100s, and all those Toyotas. So you can use a lot of the knuckle mods and whatever front suspension parts and all that stuff on one of these. Engine, there's certain oil pans and stuff like that to do a JZ swap, 1J, 2J, but everything pretty much bolts on. So I really, I'm looking forward to seeing these in a lot of the comp or pro comps and stuff like that, because these cars are actually pretty, looks cool. It's kind of small. Yeah, cool car.
So you do plan to JZ swap it if you keep it?
Well, I was gonna, but my son's turning 16 soon, and then he was like, oh, it's kind of cool, I want it. So I was like, all right, well, maybe I'll just, keep this for him. Main purpose I came here this time was to actually let him drive around the track and stuff like that, learn how to drive manual and stuff. So this might be his car, so maybe I'll find another one or something. But as of now, I'll probably just keep it the way it is. Maybe I'll borrow it from him every once in a while, put some crappy tires on it and go skid a little bit.
And you were talking about, you just retired a couple years ago from drifting, professionally. What have you been doing to keep yourself busy in the drifting world? Anything?
Well, I've been I've been judging Formula Drift Japan. I've been doing that before even when I was a driver. I was a judge steward or the driver steward for FDUS for the past 2 years. Then I, translation stuff, anything car related. Sometimes I get the chance to jump into a car, drive for, small short films and whatnot. So just overall everything car related, I guess.
Yeah.
So I'm still in the loop with the car stuff. It's just that I'm not in front of everybody doing it.
Yeah.
So regardless I drive or don't drive, this has basically been my hobby anyways. So I will come out to the track and drive any chance I get, not as often as before. But yeah, it's just for the fun. So
yeah. Okay, to take this in a direction now and have a little bit of focus, is there anything you would like to chat about specifically that you find interesting? Last time we talked about how the differences between Japanese and American drifting. I thought that was a really good topic, and it was kind of catchy in the title and stuff. Is there anything that you chat about with your friends, if you know what I mean? Because last time I led you in a conversation.
I think. This is interesting. This is an interesting topic that we could talk about: is the pro and the non-pro. But you don't have to be a pro to be at that level, because there's a lot of people that don't run pro, but they have a lot of followers, or they have nice cars and nice gadgets, and they still drive well. So just because you're a pro, it doesn't mean that you're better or not. So I think it's more of I see a lot of people that kind of overstretch themselves to do something that they're not comfortable with. Like, let's say if some people like to be at the track and have fun, they should just keep doing that instead of going somewhere else that they're not comfortable and burning themselves out. Then they just kind of I don't want to drift anymore, So the pro guys who does the competition is the racing side of it, I guess, and then the hobby side of it, where a lot of the guys that does the non-pro events, that's as important as each other, because these guys draw the crowds, the people can relate to it more, but these guys are more commercial, so you need both of it. So I kind of see a lot of the difference in styles. Like, let's say if you have cars that are slammed and that looks wide body, cool looking, bling bling stuff, versus the guys that are super grip, high power, crazy dog box and blah blah blah. They're both important, I guess. So when I'm never online that much, but when I see stuff online, you got a lot of people that are hating on each other or whatnot. But it's kind of it seems like we're losing people drifting. I don't think the population of people drifting is getting any larger. So I think we need to keep it that way, where it's everybody has to kind of appreciate each other's stuff, because you can always bite off of this looks cool, so I want to use it for my stuff, or this works good if I want to use it for whatever purposes you have. So
I think that everybody gets into drifting or cars or whatever for a very specific reason, and cool. They focus on it and they love that one thing. Some people that have been around drifting for a long time maybe like the Japanese stuff and the D1 stuff. Maybe new people are like NASCAR type people that like the racing aspect of Formula D. Some people like stance, like super low cars that are slammed. Some people just like performance, they like them higher. No one can relate to the other person typically, and it becomes something that you just think everybody else is an idiot, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I fall into that a lot too, because I see stance cars, and it's hard to respect a stance car as a race car guy.
I think it's funny. I mean it's different. So I think it's always good. Like, let's say if someone looks at me and I'm Asian, I joke about myself. It's I can't see, I'm just joking about it. But I think it's okay to do that because I'm comfortable with it. So I think when people get all crazy and pissed off about stuff that you joke about, it's I don't get it. It's just that a lot of people are so closed-minded, where you can joke about something and it should be funny to everybody. But some people get all butt sore about small things, where I think it's kind of ridiculous sometimes. But,
Yeah, and that's something that drifting has always had a problem with, and it's going to continue having a problem with it. And how do you say, the world is changing. So when you first started talking about pro versus non-pro, the first thing I thought about, in grassroots, was that you don't even have to be a professional racer now to be a professional. YouTuber can be more successful than the guy winning Formula D or second or third place, whatever. So professional in the normal sense, if you look it up in the dictionary, means you derive your main income from this thing. You know what I mean? And and probably someone outside of the typical racing world can derive a better income from the sport because they're not spending so much on competing, because competing is so expensive. They don't have to show up on a certain day. They don't have to lose. You know, like they can control their outlets of media and they can always win. I was going to say, like, then you split that up between pro, you know, like racer versus pro media guy or whatever they're doing. And I guess mechanic shops could be that way. You know, lots of mechanic shops promote themselves with drifting. Then you have the grassroots guys, and it's just getting so blended. Like before, grassroots guys just wanted to be professional racers, you know, like competitive. Now grassroots guys, you see them running around and it's like pro-am for media, if you know what I mean, and YouTubers. So I don't know if you see that a lot in Japan. Well, but I see 50 dudes with selfie sticks out here filming.
Well, I think Japan is still late in the game where they are still a little old-fashioned, because I think Twitter is a lot bigger than anything else in Japan still, and they still.
That's crazy. I don't even have a Twitter account.
Exactly. Like when people ask me, and I'm like, oh, I don't know, I do Instagram, but that's about it, you know. And it's a little different. So I think I had a conversation with some of the friends, older guys that I knew, and they always said that Japan is usually, I don't know about a long time ago, but now they seem like they're 5 years later than the U.S. So 5 years ago, U.S. is what's happening in Japan right now. So it's going to come. So I keep telling the guys when we're at competition and stuff like that, I tell the guys, like, hey, it's like, you guys should get your social media up, you know, try to do different things than everybody else, because you're going to be the first to be doing that in Japan. So that'll give you an advantage. But I think it's hard to tell somebody that they don't see it. It's just like, I remember when we were in back in the day when I was teamed up with Daigo, and I told him, I was like, hey, you know, we need to probably start making videos and stuff like that. But back then, he was kind of like, I don't see the point of that. So I don't want to spend the time or, you know, any money for something like that. Then when you look at it now, it's like, that's basically, you need that even to, you can have a badass proposal and a good team, but that's like a must that you have, or you need to actually go and, you know, talk to sponsors to be like, hey, this is what I'm going to be making. This is my social media outlet and stuff like that. So it's really important. And a couple years ago at Irwindale, this is pretty cool, and I tell this to people all the time, but this is JR, Vongin Jr. kind of had a pep talk with some of the Pro 2 guys at Irwindale, and he mentioned that, he said something about driving is the reward you get for working hard all outside of it. So, you know, running, talking to sponsors, doing media stuff, you know, getting your team ready, getting the car ready, all that stuff is the work. Like, your job isn't to drive a car. Your job is to do all that, and the reward is to be able to drive on track. So that kind of made sense to me, and I was like, oh yeah, that's the way to think, because it is. It's like, you think a professional driver's job is just driving, but I think that's old-fashioned now, where you have to be able to be, you have to multitask, you have to be good in front of cameras, you have to be good on social media, you have to be good with sponsors and everything, you know, so the whole, everything kind of counts. So Japan is still stuck in that phase where it's like, oh, I'm a good driver, I win, then people are going to, you know, want to team up with me and stuff like that. But it's actually not, because you could be the winner all the time and you could still have less sponsors than everybody, you know, is familiar with. Like you said, you could be a YouTuber or you could be something. But that's a different skill. So there is no better or, you know, worse. It's just the way the world is changing.
I was going to say, it makes it more difficult for a grassroots guy trying to transition to professional in some ways. Not so much if they just go in the media ways, but like, imagine you starting off and you're learning to be a race car driver. You're learning how to travel internationally and doing all these things. You're learning to deal with sponsors. You're learning to, you know, like, if you go back to what you were talking about, you know, your first event, I remember you telling me, like, you guys were faxing stuff, if I remember correctly, and you were using like paperwork that you printed out to get around California when you got there. Was that correct?
Yep.
Yeah, so like map quests and everything. Now you would also have to be, while you're doing all of those things, and you know, you're also having to video yourself, talk to your followers, gain an audience, you know, because you start off at zero for that. So it's a whole nother level of figuring out how to be competitive in a media landscape as well.
I know where he's coming from. I get it too. But I think at the same time, it's harder for the guys to do it now.
Yeah.
But the tools are there, so I guess it's easier to get into it. But to be successful is harder because everybody can do it now.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Then that's the thing. Like, everybody, like, I'm not gonna say just give anybody a camera. They need style, they need all that stuff, ideas and stuff like that. But if you kind of have that, you can kind of get into it and kind of start your way. So it is hard because anybody can pretty much do it if they really wanted to.
Yeah. It's difficult because it takes so long, if you know what I mean. Once somebody gets really large, like Adam, who we travel with all the time, Adam LZ, they start to get entrenched where it's harder for the small guys to come up. And then he's a better driver, he has a better team. Because when I drove like one round of FD back in 2007, and I showed up and I'm like, everybody is. That'll probably go off soon.
Yeah.
I was like, everybody has a better team. Everybody has a better car than me. They're already better drivers, and they've been driving in the series for years, you know what I mean? And all these things, you're like, this is a really big uphill battle, and it's not something that with the full-time job where I was working at the time probably 80 to 100 hours a week, every single week, of the year. I was like, this is not something that I'll be able to commit to and do well with. You know what I mean? Like, it's not something that's going to happen, and I need to move on kind of thing and do something else for fun. Which is, grassroots and everything else.
Yeah.
But the typical person now coming up, because I remember there used to be some doctors in Formula D and people that were, I'm kind of going off on a tangent, but I was just saying like you did, it's more people can do it, but at the same time it gets harder and harder and harder. It's just like simulator racing now and drifting.
Yeah.
Everybody can it used to be incredibly difficult to get good at driving, like the drifting portion. Now you look out here, there's so many guys that are so good that would mop the floor with Formula D guys from 10 years ago.
That's why when I was at Minami right now, or just maybe a couple minutes ago, and I was sitting there thinking, I remember when we were all doing jumps and stuff like that, and it wasn't like everybody was able to do it because it takes time and practice and whatnot and getting used to. But today I saw it as, man, everybody was landing. There's just a train of cars just doing it, one after another. And I'm talking we're at Matsuri, so it's not like everybody always comes here. There's probably people from from all these different foreign countries, and you probably have other Japanese guys that are from other areas as well. And then they're all here. Everybody's doing it. So it does mean that everybody's better. That's why I quit before everybody finds out that I suck. No, but really, I really think so. That's why I figured that my role was to just kind of, I think this is where I'm comfortable at, where, like you said, it's really hard, and especially for me going over there and coming back and whatnot.
Yeah.
And, it's just too much. I'm not good at, doing social media stuff, and, I don't really have that much money either, so it's I don't want to get into it anymore. That's why it was kind of a good thing where Taguchi took over, and hopefully, there's more younger guys that'll come in, maybe even from Japan or any other country, because it's that time where I don't want to sit around something that I'm not doing anything better for it. Let's say if I have sponsors and stuff, and if I'm not doing them any good, I'm not doing my job. But I don't want them to stick around just because I've been with them for a long time. So I figured that if somebody else comes in and does a better job at it, hey, you know what? Well, you helped me out for a minute and it didn't work out, then somebody else takes over. That's that,
Yeah. Oh, it's the brake lights. I'm like, that looks really cool. What else? Are you happy with your decision to quit? Do you look back and you're like, I really want to be out there, I could be competitive, I want to play? Or are you like, man, that was a lot of work to get to that, point at grid, and I'm glad I don't have to do that?
No, every time I leave, let's say when I judge or I'm at the event and I get to leave after the event is done.
Yeah.
Or let's say qualify is done, then I go home. I don't have to sit there and help work on a car or do something, and all the late nights and stuff like that. I don't miss at all. But I do miss the driving part, and I do think now it's man, if I was driving now, how would I do now? But there's no way I'd find out. Yeah. But I think it was good because I think it was getting to the point where it wasn't fun anymore. So I'm kind of barely getting back into driving too, because after being with the judges and watching everything, and then the way the teams are and the people and dealing with everything in general, the parts that people don't ever see, it's kind of tiring, and it kind of makes the sport a little bit more unattractive, I guess. So I think it's just I'm a little stubborn because I came from being a driver into working with FD or working with FD Japan or something like that. So now I want to get back into come back and look into the car part where if I drive it, I have fun, and go back and think about, oh yeah, you know what? This is why I wanted to start drifting, because it was fun. And going back to not having part when everything is too hard, you just don't want to do it anymore. So I think I made a good decision on retiring, because I probably wouldn't have done that good anyway, because I kind of suck.
You say that, but you're just being difficult. You're joking, I know.
No, I'm serious.
I mean, like, it's hard with James Dean and some of these other guys, but you were driving so well your last year.
I think
the SC was amazing.
I think that's the thing, though.
Don't get too crazy.
I got it.
Now you're like
I think so, though.
A scary story.
When the car and the team, it's like, I think, but that's what it takes.
Yeah.
There's a gazillion good drivers out here. Like tonight, I witnessed probably 30 drivers out there that could probably go into a pro car, and maybe half of them would do really well. But that's what the world is about. Is the racing world is all about. It's like you can't just be a good driver. You have to have something special. Like you have to have backing. You have to have skills. You have to have just something that if somebody gives you a chance and you take it and you make sure that you make whatever of it. And that's the whole package, and that's the winning team. So, I mean, I probably don't suck. I'm probably okay. But I didn't have what it takes to run a good team, to find good sponsors, I mean, I'm not saying my sponsors weren't good, but, more or whatever, I didn't have the ideas, I didn't have the time, and I didn't want to sacrifice a lot of stuff, because I think it would have been a better idea if I moved to the States when I was younger and stuff like that, but my son was younger. I didn't want to move around and stuff, and I didn't think this was going to come this far, So we talk about it now. We're like, oh man, I should have moved to the States a long time ago, and maybe I could have, been doing something different. But I don't want to look back and be like, oh man, should have, could have, would have. You know what? It's like, had a good run. See what I can make of it. I don't know.
It's difficult too with so many talented and people with so much money coming in. Like it would be hard to stay relevant and battle them because there's probably only 8 to 10 spots that are really relevant, say at the pro level in Formula D or something like that. And you're constantly having some people that are very well funded and very talented with a lot of drive and support. Like displacing the people that have been there for a while. That's got to be really difficult.
And I'm just getting old, I think, but I just see it as, man, you know what? Like, I mean, lately we've been having like disasters and stuff like that in Japan, but I just see it as you want to get somewhere and you try really hard, right? But it's never that bad. Like I'm breathing, I'm eating, I'm not starving. I have a car. I drove to Ebisu, and I'm just talking to you guys. I mean, I can't ask for any more than that. So I think. I'm happy already. So be happy.
Are you still getting better as a driver?
Oh yeah, no, for sure. Like watching, this is we just started talking about this. I was talking to some guys that are really big into simulators, but the one with no movement. I think a lot of the Japanese drivers are the feeling type, so they go off. This is because I watched the FD Japan, talked to them at the driver meeting, and I watched guys in the US and FD, and I compare it. But a lot of the J drivers are more of the feeling style, so they're like, it's not so visual, so they're like, oh, they come here and then they do this. But guys like that has a bigger chance of messing up because their feeling actually gets into it. So if they're a little nervous or if they want to get it over with, they'll initiate earlier. Then next thing you know, the car doesn't go to where they want it to be or something. Versus the simulator type guys, where I think a lot of the American guys are kind of like that. They always talk about markers. Like at FD, they're always like, oh, I want a marker here. We want a marker here. But that's because they have that marker, and they're kind of like a robot, where they're like, okay, I initiate here, then the car should do this. And then they're, how can I say it? They're visual. So a lot of the simulator guys say they can't feel the car when they're driving the simulator. You don't feel the G's and stuff like that, but everything is visual. So they learn that. Then when they get into the car, then they get the feeling part of it. And I think that's easier to get into than feeling the car, then doing something visual. Because when I do a simulator, I kind of suck. Like, I don't even know what the hell I'm doing. Because I think like, oh, no feedback. It's hard.
Yeah.
But I think I have to use my, I think that's harder than a guy that's been in a simulator getting into a car and getting used to a car.
Yeah. So, all right, I have something to ask, like directly to that or whatever you want to say. One, it's going to be, are American drivers better than Japanese or Japanese better? And the second part of that is I would say in the past, the Japanese for quite a long time were way better than the Americans. And one of the reasons was because they had not unlimited seat time, but they had amazing little toge roads up in the mountains and stuff. They went out all the time and practiced at night. They obviously had a head start, they were doing it 10, 20 years beforehand and everything. And they just had so much more experience than even the guys that were professionally drifting in America. When I did D1 USA for a whole season, like 08 or 09, Chelsea and I and Force Wang, a bunch of guys were competing against the Japanese guys, and you just realize, you're like, holy cow, Kumakubo and all these guys are so good. Like, Kumakubo owns a track, you know what I mean? Like, no one was getting as much seat time as those guys. And at some point, I think the tables turned a certain amount. What do you think that was? Like, why did the Americans catch up and everything? Why could we get past the limited seat time? Which, you agree the Japanese guys had, like, probably 10 times more seat time per driver, if you know what I mean? Yes or no?
So, hey, are your viewers more Americans or Japanese?
Definitely more Americans.
Americans? Oh man, dude, the American drivers are so much better, man. Yeah, go America! I'm just kidding.
Yeah. He's like, I'm just kidding. The Japanese are better.
No. It's not better or not. I think that going back to the whole sense, the feeling, the way they are, it's a little different. Number one, I think that, like you said, the Japanese drivers did have a lot of seat time and this and that. But a lot of it was maybe unneeded too. So if you think about it, my friend wrote out a graph before where it's like, let's say if I started drifting 5 years ago and my friend started drifting 15 years ago.
Yeah.
If he taught me what to do in the shortcut for the 10 years, I could do what he's doing in 5 years than his 15 years. And, the experience of, wrecking and, different tracks and stuff like that might be a little different. But in that sense, I think the U.S. drivers they have the shortcut now because, they got the data and stuff like that. At the same time, what I've noticed is back to, being able to, snoop around at the tracks and talk to people and stuff like that, collecting data. Some of the guys from FDUS are in Japan, and they're collecting data here too, just to see what's going on with the cars and how they're doing things here that's different from the U.S. It seems that a lot of the guys in Japan gets a lot of laps, like for practice, and it seems like they're just doing laps to get the feel for. Versus the U.S. guys seems like they'll do the laps, but they have a limited amount, and every lap means a little bit more than here. Because here they're just like, oh, let's just do it. But here there's more of like collective data and a lot of the things that they actually obtain when they're doing the practice laps. So it seems like data and theories are a lot more bigger in the U.S., which helps the drivers. And a lot of the guys in the U.S. don't mind on jumping on, like, let's say if somebody says, oh, ISFAB's great, everybody tries it and everybody wants it. Oh, this car is no good. This engine doesn't work for me. I'm going to put a 2J in, or I'm going to put a V8 in, or something. They just do it. And it seems like a lot of the U.S. guys are more, they'll do it so that it's going to better them in whatever way, financially or performance. Versus in Japan, it seems a little bit more of like, they kind of want to stick with this because they like it or it's convenient. So maybe that's the difference. So driving wise, I honestly think all the drivers in the world, everybody's good. Like you're as good as me and I'm as good as you.
No.
That's how it is.
It's not.
It's just that
it's not as good as you.
It is. Trust me. So it is, but it really depends on how you feel, how your car is doing, and how your car is set up, and how you practice and spend your time practicing there. If you have more people that gives you more feedback, if you have more videos, if you have more data, you obviously will learn more off of it versus just going out there and thinking you're doing okay doesn't really help out either too. So I mean, I really think that it's something that I want to see. I want to see like the best group of U.S. guys and best group of Japanese guys, all on the similar tires and similar, car regulations, and be able to go at it under the similar rules.
I like that. I was just thinking about two different things and I got off topic in my brain. I hate when I do that. I have a terrible memory.
I do that all the time.
That's part of getting old. One thing I was going to ask was, what do you mean, like, explain to me like I'm 5 about what the data was? And the second question leads into another. I'll let you choose your own adventure here. The second, because that might be boring to talk about the data. The second thing is option video and a lot of, like, VHS tapes and DVDs and all that stuff shaped the entire direction of drifting in Japan for quite some time. Americans no longer see much of that stuff because we have YouTube and it's no longer the one source of drifting that we see. Is it still a popular thing for people to watch here? Do people still buy the magazines? Is that still shaping, D1 and keeping it moving? Or did all that go by the wayside and they have no unifying force that is pushing drifting forward in one vision, if that makes sense? Before, you drove in D1, you became a character, in my opinion, like what I saw. You became somewhat famous and represented shops and stuff like that. You were in the videos, you became famous for some type of fame. I don't know what they got out of it necessarily. And that got pushed forward. Like D1 became a world-class thing because of those videos and because of the magazines and everything. Is there anything with like unifying vision moving forward for Japan right now? Is that somewhat correct, do you think?
Oh yeah, no, I think so.
Okay.
So number one, the data part is more of going back to, like, let's say using, for instance, like let's say if you have like a dash, you could download things off of it, see what the car is doing, see how the driver is doing, videos, whatnot. They got like the shock sensors, everything. So everything is advanced, seems like, in the U.S. and then they use it. But here you still have, for instance, like in the U.S., there's a lot of guys that runs 2-way suspension, 3-way suspension, right? Mm-hmm. At the pro level in Japan, they're still all 1-ways. Mm-hmm. So that kind of shows that they're already at a disadvantage of doing a setup on their suspension, depending on the track, because all they can do is go one way or the other. That's it. There is no 2-way or 3-way. So I think like the collective data and stuff like that goes to knowing what the driver likes and knowing what the driver wants to do and knowing what the competition wants you to do. You can kind of set the car up and have the driver be like, yo, you drive this, drive it like this. And you got good guys or you got people that are knowledgeable about stuff like that around you. So I mean, that's the part that helps out the data part, I think. And the other thing we were talking about right now. Yeah. So, yes, I don't even know what direction drifting is moving towards in Japan. Like, I see Daigo is sponsored by Toyota in Japan. So that's a big thing, because manufacturers don't really do a lot of the drifting. They always want to do or they hear drifting, they're like, oh, no, we don't want to deal with it because of the background in Japan where it used to be street drifting and blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, magazines, videos, and all that stuff, I don't see it going anywhere. I haven't even picked up a drifting magazine in Japan for a long time because, like you said, you could just grab stuff off of online. There's more data that you want that you can get or information that you want from online as well. Mm-hmm. So the direction of drifting, I don't even know. I think Japan is kind of in the second generation shaping drifting because D1 doesn't seem like they're doing super big. I heard a rumor that there's Drift Kingdom, which used to be another series. What was it? Man, what was that? Drift Kingdom. Drift Muscle became Drift Kingdom, and I kind of heard something about that. They're teaming up with D1 next year.
Oh, that's weird.
Or something. That's just
because that was Drift Muscle got split off, I think, from D1 because of Tsuchiya and.
Yeah, I don't know the whole in and outs and stuff like that. Yeah, but then all that stuff. So, and then you have FD Japan, which I work for D1 for some of the stuff they do. I'm actually going to be translating for them at the FIA event. Then I work for FD Japan and stuff like that. But just because I do that doesn't mean that I pick sides. It's just that I think they both have their goods and bads. and people are just gonna find their way. Like if people think this is more fair or this is more fun or interesting to do, they'll do it. Versus some people might think like, well, my sponsors want me to do this. So it's like a separation right now. So I think the shaping of drifting is, I mean, it's kind of interesting to watch this next 2-3 years, see what's going to happen, because you never know. FD Japan might not even be there anymore, or D1 might not be there anymore. Maybe they'll unify. I don't know, something. They might have something crazy going on. You never know.
Directly with that same thing you were just talking about. I'm so tired after Matsuri. Okay, so we were talking about D1 shaped drifting in Japan and kind of gave it a unifying vision. D1 sold or option or whoever owned it and all. I'm not sure how that worked, but I would assume that the DVD sales and all of that stuff in the magazines was much greater than the actual audience attendance at the events, especially because like how many people could actually sit at Minami to buy tickets? You can't fit 10,000 people at Minami to buy tickets. So you had a much greater worldwide audience through selling the actual experience through an edited DVD or whatever, months later, so that people could see it. And then you basically are getting the ticket sales that way. Formula D and other organizations don't necessarily do the same thing because obviously they do ticket sales and it's just a different world because media is not so controlled through one thing. So I'm getting to the point which is, will D1, have they transitioned into like having spectator accounts that will keep them going? Has Formula D Japan got enough spectators to keep them going? Because it doesn't seem like Formula D Japan necessarily is monetizing themselves through some type of video sale or magazine sale, or like they're not large enough for the sponsors to necessarily deal with. Do you see what I'm saying? Yep. How are they going to monetize themselves and stay relevant long term? Because it doesn't seem like the crowds are big enough. How many people are like at a typical Formula D Japan event?
I mean, the bigger ones are probably about 5,000 to 7,000.
Okay, so they're really big. So that seems like it would keep.
That's the big ones. Yeah. But then the smaller ones, I mean, it's like maybe like 1,000, 2,000 or something. But if you think about it, when you think of the population of Japan and the population of the U.S., there's 3 times more population in the U.S.
Yeah,
something
but you
like
can't go for that because if you have something in Tokyo, you have 34 million people in one centralized thing.
Well, I mean, everything is outside of it. So, but I think. The ticket sales is probably not strong for them, and they're going to have to, strictly rely on a lot of their sponsorships for the series.
Yeah.
And I think that's why a lot of it's going on to online, because it's easier actually for a sponsor to jump online because everybody in the world sees it. So I'm actually looking forward to seeing more sponsors that, like, let's say, hey, I'm sponsoring everything. Not everything, but like, let's say FD, FD Japan, Drift Masters, whatnot. Anything that you could watch online. I would actually, I'm surprised that a lot of like the gambling and a lot of the sponsors, so-called sponsors, aren't sponsoring them already, because they have to live off of sponsorship online. If they have viewers, that's somewhere that they want to put their name on, So I think that's probably gonna be something that's gonna be coming up in the future. Yeah. But it's gonna have to be international sponsors, because it's hard to get a Japanese sponsor to sponsor FD Japan now, because they're just kind of like, well, this is how many people come and how many people watch in Japan versus the world is the audience. So I'm looking forward to seeing like a worldwide sponsorship from somewhere, maybe in the future. I don't know.
So you have to end up with really large sponsors to work on the world scale to be able to.
Yep.
That makes really good sense. But which is probably difficult for a. Sorry, go ahead.
But I think. Just because it is drifting, I think it's still possible. Because it's still as much as it costs for us, and I think a lot of the guys that are, doing other races and stuff like that could be costing a lot more. So just because drifting is a little bit more of an inexpensive motorsport, a professional motorsport out there, maybe it's possible.
I find it difficult to think that the Japanese would work well on a world stage. If you know what I mean, in English or in whatever languages, like they seem a little bit stubborn in a lot of that stuff.
Now we're getting into something deep. I've been living in Japan all my life, and I lived on the military base until I was 15 or 16, and after that I moved off base, which is Japan, and I lived there for 30 years now, or 20 some years now. this is a Japan problem that we're kind of. It's weird. We always talk about drifting, and we come in we the Japanese problem where it's like, yeah, it's said, don't even start making things, translating things more, because there's a lot more interesting things in Japan that it hasn't even been covered yet. But it's just that they don't want to share it in English, which I'm not going to say English is the best or number one, but it technically is probably one of the number one languages spoken all over the world. Then your audience. So when you make a DVD or if you make a show in Japanese, only people that can enjoy it is Japanese people. That's it. And then their audience is this much, where the world is this big, Japan has to catch on and become a little bit more international. So, I mean, that's probably why they want me to do stuff with FD Japan in Japan, because I speak English and Japanese.
You speak perfect English, so it's really good.
Thank you. Did you know that? I actually went to American school, so I had to learn Japanese afterwards.
That's funny.
So when somebody asks me or tells me, hey, you're speaking good English, it's supposed to be, hey, you speak good Japanese, because Japanese.
But you learned it on an American base and everything from Americans, right?
Yeah, I mean, I had to do the whole I pledge allegiance to them, everything, yeah.
I watched the Saturday Night Live skits where it's like a Japanese person speaking English to other people and teaching it incorrectly, if you know what I mean, in a Japanese way. It was funny.
Hey, well, my mother-in-law, my wife is half, but my mother-in-law kind of talks like that. She speaks English, but it's the da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
The something da-da-da-da, like a Japanese person speaking English.
Is there anything going on in Japan right now that's like changing the game for drifting? That something that you find really, really interesting that gets your imagination going, if you know what I mean? Something you want to be a part of, something that's different and moving the game kind of forward. Like for me, I showed up to everything so late here, obviously. I showed up to Ebisu, 30 years after it was built kind of thing. We missed all that. I showed up to JZX 100s, way later than everybody else. I keep looking for the next thing, whether it be some giant track experience like this where I could keep a car at, I could travel to, I could stay there. The currency exchange rate's been really good for Americans in Japan for quite some time. The golden age of the drift cars is kind of dying here.
Yeah.
But
I honestly think you have to look into the U.S. again, because the trend always goes back and forth, U.S. to Japan, Japan to U.S., stuff like that. And yes, we have a lot of stuff, and there's a lot of history and stuff like that. But now you look at it, when you go, there's no events in Japan that are like Grid Life, and things that they do in the U.S. where it's kind of like a mixed thing and a cultural thing, and it's kind of a cool thing where they don't really do that in Japan. And I've never really even heard of anything that's that big in Japan. Maybe they do something smaller that I didn't know, but honestly,
the Big X here, was that not kind of a cultural thing?
That's that was a while back before everybody caught on to that.
Yeah.
So that was kind of like before, or maybe it was too early. Like it wasn't the right timing. So I think if they start doing stuff like that, maybe it'll be great. But at the same time, I'm actually looking forward to seeing, for instance, when you watch the Hoonigan, the Burnyard and stuff like that too. It's like people are, they don't have stuff like that here. So now you have the U.S. culture, Japanese drifting, and this and that, and Ebisu and the history and stuff like that they have in Japan is great too. But at the same time, it looks like a lot of the new things are happening in the U.S. and it's probably going to become, Japan's going to take that and give it the Japanese twist, and that's going to become something again, and it's going to go back and forth.
Do you think they'll do it before everybody? I don't mean to sound like derogatory, but before everybody gets too old, if you know what I mean. Like a Grid Life thing is based upon very young people coming out.
Yeah.
Merging obviously like a music festival with drifting and with road racing, with all these different things. It seems like the average age of the guys down at Higashi and stuff road racing is pretty old.
Yes.
Doesn't seem like they're 20 to 30. It seems like they're 45 to 65. The average age of a dude with a Corolla here is what, 60? I'm not exactly.
Oh no,
it's
probably
60.
50s and stuff like that easily. But no, I mean, that's why Japan needs that,
right?
Because, or we're gonna go back to the cultural thing, but it's always the older guy in Japan and then the younger guy and then the older guy stays there. And that's why I wanted to retire early as well, is because I don't want to be that guy. Like, I don't want to be the guy that's hanging on to my hookups and sponsors and all that stuff, where somebody else that can come in to do something greater, they should be able to, pass the torch or whatever,
Yeah.
But then it seems like Japan, they just keep doing it. So all the young guys are kind of like, oh man, it's like I can't get anywhere. Like,
Do the young guys even care though? Do they want to do it?
oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, because a lot of the young guys, like, this is something crazy where I've never seen this many guys that are wanting to do FD Japan now because they want to go to the States, and they want to compete in the US because they're interested in it, and I never seen, nobody really talked about it before. Now it's like everybody wants to do FD US. There's I judge at another event called MSC, which is like the feeder series for the FD Japan, but even that, usually there's like maybe 30 cars, right? But now there's like a trend. Everybody wants to do FD Japan now, that they sold out all the spots and they extended it and gave it more slots, and they still sold all that out, and people are on the waiting list now at the end of this month. So I'm talking like that's like 40, 50 probably cars easily.
Yeah.
So now I see a trend where it's like everybody wants to do that so they can go to the US because they like that style here. And I think the younger guys are more like that because somewhat D1 and maybe the other organizations are maybe a little bit older. So a lot of the younger guys are kind of like, they have no spot to be there. So they're looking for something to do, and then boom, they found FD Japan and they're kind of like, oh, I want to do this.
Yeah.
And I think that's something great.
That is really good. I think right now in the US, YouTube is really doing that. All these kids get they start watching YouTube videos, they listen, and they like, oh, I can just buy a 350Z, or I could do this, or I could copy someone's build, or that, whatever. And we're lowering the bar to entry by explaining to them very clearly not to overbuild cars, to get something simple. Their first few track experiences are really good and everything, and we're getting huge increases in the numbers of drivers and stuff. Event organizations are popping up all over the place. We know we're kind of getting to a golden age where, cars are really cheap, lots and lots of events. The tracks are starting to let us in, kind of thing. I've been doing event hosting for 16 years now. God, makes me feel old. I was gonna say it keeps going, but at the same time, I myself, you see it in such incremental doses, it never feels like a big jump, if you know what I mean. Never feels like we're really getting anywhere.
Well, it's spread through 16 years. That's a lot. If you look at year 1 and year 16, it's probably a big deal.
No, it is a big deal and everything, but I feel like, dang, Corolla guys. Is it a Corolla? NASR or something.
No, it's something.
I feel like I'm on a finite, just like your racing career and you were retired, I'm on a finite lifespan for how long I'm going to do this. It's really, really hard and backbreaking to host events, just like it is to run a race team or anything. And I want to get somewhere where you're super excited and happy. And I mean, I am. I still love driving. I drive at all my events and stuff. It's awesome. But I want to feel like we really get somewhere and do something crazy.
Oh yeah. Well, that's why
I'm never going to build an Ebisu is my point.
Oh.
We're never going to see a facility like this that I'm doing.
Never. You never know. There
Right.
may be a Aaron Losey track in the middle of Texas somewhere.
Probably not. There's no elevation to deal with. But you know what I'm saying? You want to do something crazy. You probably wanted to win Formula D 3 times in a row. Something like that. And you get done and you're like, well, it didn't accomplish that. You're like, I accomplished a lot of stuff. But you're like, the goals are so big sometimes that you're not going to accomplish them.
Well, I think, it's just like you. My goal now is to be able to give back something to drifting. That's why I wouldn't mind helping out, doing things with the competition side of it and whatnot. And it's so complicated now. So I think we have kind of the similar thoughts, because cars like this too. It's I really want to do a video of, hey, I want to buy a car, get it from the lot, bring it, be like, hey, let's go drift it, and be like, wow, that was fun. That could be you, and that's exactly what this car was too. It's I didn't really do shit to it, and we got to go and drift it. And it's not about, I think when you're a competitor from the get-go, it's a problem where you're if you're I was lucky because it was like a group of friends. We all just went to, screw around in our cars, and that's how we got into drifting. Mm-hmm. And it was more of like we fed off of each other. But when you become competitive within that, then it gets harder because you want to one-up everybody.
Yeah.
But if everybody has cars like this and everybody's just enjoying it for the time being, I think everybody has to kind of go back to the simple life where it's like, oh, let's just go and have fun, burn up some tires, and enjoy drifting for a little bit. And then that'll kind of give everybody a minor setback and maybe like a little, I don't know, maybe reality check and be like, oh yeah, hey, I don't need WiseFab, or I don't need to throw a 2J in it, and I think everybody's at the phase where they're trying to realize that right now.
I brought one of my drivers here that drives on a supercharged.
The guy won, who won.
Oh no, someone else. I bring a lot of people, but I brought a guy that has a supercharged V8, dog box, quick change rear end, WiseFab front and rear.
I don't even have a car like that.
Yeah, I know. He has all this stuff. He runs it on 295, 45 Maxxis, the sticky tires. If that is a lot of tire. The car is crazy fast. I sold him my R33 from here, like a Matsuri car. He came over. He did more laps. And he's owned this car for multiple years with multiple drivetrains and everything. He drove more laps here than he's ever driven that car. And not because we don't have the ability to drive a ton of laps at Lone Star Drift. It's because he built such an aggressive car, and he was always in a competitive mindset. You go out in a competition car, you do 5 laps to get used to the track. As soon as you feel comfortable, you put it away, you make adjustments, you do whatever, but you don't need to take any more laps for fun. Like, you're there to win. And he had that mentality for quite some time, and the car obviously broke constantly too. But I mean, like, it's an 800 wheel car kind of thing. And he has now done more laps, and one Matsuri being here for, I think we've been here for 10 days, 11 days, something like that, drifting. And
I bet you
he's
had
like,
fun too.
Oh, not only that, but he's driving that car, the crap R33, better than he does his comp car, because he's not worried about it. He's not scared. It's really cool to watch. And it's like you said, someone getting down to like something just basic, and they learn to enjoy it. But he's another person that I'm sure you've seen it so many times, just like you're talking about these new kids getting into drifting. They get into drifting because they see the competitive events. That's what excites them, and then that's what they want to go do, and that's what they build from the get-go. They immediately builds, they look up what is the best of everything. That's what I want. I'm going drifting, and I'm going to win.
Yeah.
And then it's very different than they expect.
Yeah. Well, there's I think you have to take the baby steps, and I think everybody kind of has to do it, because maybe some people are different, talent-wise and stuff like that, but we always talk about that too. Like, when there's a guy that's driving a 400 horsepower SR car, full, pedal to the metal all the time, and, just doing everything they can just to keep the car drifting, that doesn't mean that they could just jump into an 800 horsepower car and be able to do the same thing. It's so different. You got a fine grip, and then torque difference and all this other stuff too. So I think when you grow, you get a car that's this. And if you're a driver, and if you're not here, then you can't do anything to the car yet until you're here. Then when you're here, you build the car a little bit so it's here. Then you drive the car more. Then when you're better than the car, you do this. Yeah. You kind of got to do that. And I got lucky because I had all the time in the world. I'm 42 years old almost. So I had like 20 years or something that I had to do the baby steps and stuff like that. But I think now there's so much information and everything is there. Yeah. Before, when I had a hot Troku, we had to go, on my lunch break, I'd go to a junkyard and I'd look for parts. And it's like, oh, couldn't find anything today. So that means I don't get to buy anything, and then, you do that many times, you finally find a green shock. You're like, oh, this must be aftermarket. I'm going to put it on my car. But that's the only performance parts we had, and everything else was just ideas and time, Yeah. So I think when you better the car a little bit, then you drive the crap out of the car, then that's when it's, where it's not just car and then driver, or then the car and the driver, It has to have a good balance. And I think a lot of the pro drivers probably know, a lot of the guys probably went through that route as well. So like the guy you brought too, hopefully this is something he learned. And like by coming with Aaron or getting advice from this guy would, obviously it's going to help you out in some way, because I don't think he's just doing it to do it.
I don't know why I do it, honestly.
I don't know, why do we do this? Why are we
There's no answer. There's no answer. talking about helping the kids and stuff, what specifically do you do? Like this year we had, I host the events, we do stuff. We sent some kids to SEMA from my events, and like they got to do demos. You've been to SEMA. How cool is it as a little Pro-Am dude or Texas Street Legal, one of our series, to do like in the front lot of SEMA, to get to drift in front of the entire place and do all that stuff. We bring the winner of our Texas Street Legal over here and put him in like a Matsuri car. Luke Fink, taking somebody over to Luke Fink to go drive at his place as an exchange program. We gave away like a full JZX90 with like all brand new R154 and turbo and all this junk. We're trying to do these things. What could I do better to like give back to the people like that you're thinking of, that you're doing and stuff? Because you're obviously working with drivers, you're translating, you're judging, you're going to the events, and you're giving all your time to this and your expertise, which is really important because obviously it is in short supply. I don't know how short supply it is in like Japan specifically, because there's so many experienced guys here. Is it? Probably, especially with English, though, it is.
Yeah, I think
you're probably one of the very few guys that speaks fluent English at your level of driving here. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I don't think I've ran into another. Well, maybe I just don't know. You know, so I'm not gonna say.
But there's not a lot.
Very, very.
You have a very like short supply of that, and especially that can like. Sorry, go ahead.
No. I got lucky. Anyways, go ahead.
What do you do specifically? You know what I mean? Like, what works really well for you? Because a lot of my stuff is a total waste of time, if you know what I mean. Like, I would think in the past, I used to sit in cars and teach people how to drift. So I would do that for hours and hours and hours at events, and I'd get vertigo, and like I would throw up and stuff. And it was hard on my body. That was useless because I was always teaching people that weren't going to learn. All the normal people that learn, they go learn on their own. Now I teach on a simulator instead of being inside the cars. But I was going to say all that was wasted time. I'm sure somebody got some use out of it, but it wasn't very good.
I don't think it's a waste of time.
So what do you do specifically? Like the best use of time for helping people, do you think?
Oh, that's hard because it really depends on. It seems like a lot of the younger generation guys kind of give up easily.
Yeah.
It seems like it because there's a lot of
it's hard.
Yeah, well, it's hard, but I think we were lucky when we were older. We didn't have anything else. We didn't have internet in our pocket. So it was like we had less distractions. We did so many great things that we didn't even have a phone in our camera on our phone, so we couldn't even do that. So I think it was just that life was a lot more of a pain in the ass a long time ago. So we had no choice but to go through all those obstacles and learn. So. I don't know. I guess I don't even know how to say that. Like, just somehow keep creating something that's going to keep their attention. I don't know.
What's an example of the best use of your time for that, if you know what I mean? Like, for me, I would say instead of teaching in the cars and sitting in there and doing all that stuff, I could make a YouTube video explaining something that I would have spent, a million years teaching hundreds of people something. Just make one video covering all of that. Like, instead of teaching everyone to change a tire one by one in a physical environment, you make one video and post it, and now everybody knows how to change a tire. I can do that in a driver's meeting format.
It does seem like there isn't that many how-to videos though now, because everybody probably thinks that it's covered already. But like somebody that could relate to you, such as a younger guy, if he doesn't, let's say if he doesn't know how to change his tire, right? He's not gonna go on YouTube and watch. Mr. Smith at whatever tire shop change his tire. He kind of wants to see something more hip and fun, right? And that's something that's a content that you can make where you can do a how-to video that's a little bit more for the people that wants to see it. I don't know,
we filmed that a couple days ago.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, I'll see that.
I was just looking for things to film.
Okay. Well, shit.
And I was changing tires.
Other than that, you guys should do do you do a high air pressure tests?
I have done a lot of that in my own time, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Whether it be like I was running on Achille 123s and had to run them at crazy pressures to get them to work here, and they were delamming crazy. Like, what do you mean by high pressure tests?
Oh no, it's fine. You get a crappy tire.
Oh.
And then just do the whole. You can do something where you measure like what the car does from here to here.
Yeah.
At this air pressure, I don't know, because nobody really gets it, so I think it's hard. But that's something.
We have a friend that tests tires and everything and makes videos, Dan Brockett, and he does a good job at that.
Okay.
So he goes through and says how many laps he gets per tire on this very specific 350Z at a specific track on, you know, a specific configuration. But that's difficult because, you know, sometimes you sit laying the throttle a bit longer, all these different things. Sometimes you're on.
Hey, are people are you people are anybody interested in history?
So I've actually really wanted to do a bunch of like historical things. Like Chelsea and I sat down and did like, I mean we should sit down and like do some. We were talking about that recently. You know, talk about, you know, 2004, 2005, 2006, 2007.
That's something I would want to know, because it's not like I grew up driving with everybody in the U.S. I mean, at competitions, yeah, but like you said, Chelsea, and I know everybody has their own background stuff, and they got their own crew where they grew up with and how they got into drifting. And same as the Drift Alliance guys, and you got the guys from the West Coast, like Gucci and all those guys too. They probably all have their own stories too. That might be kind of interesting, because that's something that I want to know, because I want to see, you know, when I'm in LA, I run into a Japanese guy, and I always ask him like, why are you here? Because I want to know. Maybe I'm nosy, but I kind of want to know, how did you end up here? You know, you're Japanese and you live in the U.S. now. It's like, how did you get here? And then everybody always has a interesting story. So that's
For drifting,
something.
it's just a string of bad decisions. Not having anything more constructive to do with that time.
I think so too. And 20 years later, we're still doing it. So
yeah, it's because it's more addictive than crack.
It is.
Yeah, and I don't know why. It probably has something to do with like dopamine receptors and adrenaline coursing through your body. I've tried to tell people, like Chelsea and I, we were drifting on Minami a couple years ago, and we probably did, I don't know. I don't remember if it was in the dry or wet, but it was probably in the dry, because when the dry, you like, it's so much more raw, if you know what I mean, and more aggressive. But every time we would hit the jump and, you know, like you finish, because we're in tandem, you get a hit of adrenaline every single time you hit the jump. And after like 30 or 40 laps, like we both were like queasy, if you know what I mean. Like we come off track and I'm like, oh my God, like.
You're kind of beat.
Yeah. I don't know where I was going with that.
No, but then that's the whole adrenaline thing and stuff like that. That's the rush.
Oh, why we're addicted. Yeah. So I was going to say, like, you have so many chemicals going through your body. Does that still happen to you on Minami?
Yeah. That's why I come here, because it's kind of hard to get that at a normal track anymore. Yeah. That's why I come to Nishi here, because you kind of do the shortcut and just haul ass all the way to the wall. Then you're actually going like over 100 miles an hour.
Yeah. They blocked it off, didn't they?
Well, you can still go right around in between the rumble strip and the guardrail. But I think we're to the point where, like, okay, go out to this normal track and just do some skids. I think we're at the level where that's not good enough anymore. So we're like the super addictive, like, we're like the really messed up crackheads where, you know, we'll be like, yo man, I'll, you know, whatever to get it. You know, I think that's why I have to come to Ebisu and I have to go to Minami and I have to do the jump, because that's the most like, ooh, if I land wrong, I'm going into the wall, and you need that little, I don't know.
No, I agree.
I think we're just messed up.
Yeah.
We're scarred for life.
I get bored easily now, because I do so many crazy things, just like you did. You travel around the world, you're doing crazy stuff all the time and everything. You just sit at home and you're like, huh.
This is
you're
nice.
like it is nice, but you're like, I should go do something. Like I should go do something crazy. Like I should just like book a ticket to some other part of the world and go do something. You're like, I don't know. Although sometimes it's too much effort, and you just want to sit there and like be old. And
that's kind of how I am right now. I mean, I just want to sit there with my dogs, my girls. I'm like, then it's like, oh, I gotta get on the plane in 12 hours. Oh, shit, you know.
Yeah.
But you know what? I don't know if you're we could talk about this later too. But then shit, if you're interested, we could probably do more stuff in Japan too, because I think that's something
I asked you last year. Yeah, no, I said rent me a car. I contacted you partway through the year, and I was like, rent me a car. Let's go do another track.
Dude, no. You have to. Or
beg you?
No. Do a track day. Find a couple of tracks that you have in mind that are, I don't know, that everybody knows, that's
Yeah.
exciting, and yeah, so we'll find some time and do that.
Okay, let me pitch you an idea really quickly. So, I probably shouldn't spill the beans on this because this is an idea to develop. I can edit this later. Okay, so in January, in January 21st to 3rd or whatever, we're doing a road trip for drift cars.
Okay.
It's Matt Field, Chelsea, Adam LZ, Taylor Ray, Trevor. You probably don't know some of the names, but big YouTubers and some pro guys. Jake Jones from Australia, Luke Fink is coming over, and we're taking about 11 drift cars, street driving them about 3,500 miles, and we're doing 7 road courses and kart tracks. Bunch of kart tracks and a couple big road courses, but the big ones are gonna be too hard on the cars. We're gonna go from Austin, Texas up to North California and the cold part of the year on the southwest, so it's good weather, if you know what I mean, and easy on the cars. And it's like a drift day at a track, and then you drive to the next location. The first drive's like 12 hours, and then after that they get shorter because the tracks are closer in California and stuff. Is that something possible in Japan? Would there cars last and you could do something like that?
There are so many.
That would be so
I've been
cool.
talking. Okay,
Let's do it.
okay. So I have a problem. I have so many fucking ideas.
Yeah?
But nobody really films here.
Yeah.
I don't know how to edit all that stuff, and I don't have the patience to
I'm
do
bringing all YouTubers, if you know what
exactly.
I mean.
So
And media people.
So they did that as a video and video option before. It was called Drift Cannonball Run.
Uh-huh.
So they would
That's
start.
exactly what this is.
They started somewhere down south, and they made their way. Or no, I forgot. Then they got on the ferry. They went all the way. We can start somewhere where it's if we timed it right,
Yeah.
we could start from up north, do some tracks, maybe even stop by shops, stuff like that. I think if it's a few weeks, it's good enough.
Logistically, could you do track days on weekdays? Because the way we're doing it is we're getting each of the facilities as a media thing. We're showing up on a Monday and then a Wednesday and then a Thursday. So it's even better because there's no customers on those days. So the tracks are, giving it to us for
I think
free.
it's going to be hard if they already have something that's, let's say, there are tracks that'll be cooperative, but at the same time, there are some tracks that they have to, run their track day event. But then you could probably talk to the track day event and say, hey, thanks to blah blah blah, shout out to blah blah blah, they're letting us use the track on their blah blah blah, And then I think that'll be good enough to be able to kind of butt in and do some stuff too.
That'd be rad. How would we do the cars? How would we get 10 drift cars and get them street registered? Is that a thing? Is that an impossible thing to get over?
I think that they would all have to be. I'd have to look into it the legal way, because I think we can all just lend you cars.
Yeah.
It's just that it's not legal because the insurance won't cover it and blah blah blah. If something happens,
Oh.
I think that's the problem. That's why a lot of the guys, if they film in Japan and there's foreigners that drives it, it's always the rental car number. So they drive the car on the street as the rental car.
Huh.
It's registered. Let's say, for instance, this thing, there's a different character that's all for rental cars. If you look at all the rental cars, it's like that character right there.
Uh-huh.
If you see that character,
So do you have to go steal a license plate and do that, you mean?
No, I think it's the way they register it or something.
No
It's
way.
Oh.
weird stuff in Japan. But then I think if you do that, it's possible. Or if you have a 3-car stacker, 3 of those or something like that,
It'd be a
you're
lot
driving
more
around.
fun to
I know.
street drive them though. It would be a lot more entertaining.
I'll actually.
The problem for us though is we can't even go to an AutoZone in Japan or whatever they're called, yellow hats or up garages, and fix anything because we can't even buy it. We don't even know how to ask for anything. It'd be very difficult to keep the cars running unless there was a few Japanese people as handlers, if you know what I mean, hanging out with us. But God, that would be so cool. Let's do it. Oh, I'm down.
Yeah, I'm down.
I'm 100%
Shit, I'm not doing anything
This
anyways.
is his word. He needs.
Huh?
Yeah,
I'm not
do
doing
it.
it
Put
anyways.
this in the video.
Sounds like fun.
All right, let's do it.
Anything fun,
I was gonna say, and it would be so cool to hit all these little tiny tracks that we see in video games and stuff, like Bihoku
They're all
and
over.
Tamada,
Yep.
and I can't even think of any others.
They have a lot.
It needs to be like Mega Tamada on Assetto Corsa, where they're all in one facility, which I guess this is.
And then some of the tracks are so cheap that you can just rent it yourself.
Yeah,
Like
we're fine with that too.
I think Nishi, if it's a day that they have no races, you could borrow this track for like $1,000 or something like that.
Wow.
And then I think it's one of those, if you have more people, more than 10 people, it becomes higher and higher. But if you're actually renting it for yourself or something like that, it's fairly cheap.
Oh,
So
that'd be really cool.
Yeah.
Not that we need to rent this or anything, but to get the other tracks.
Yeah. No,
Okay.
So there's other tracks that has other options too. You never know.
Is there anything else you'd rather talk about or anything, or are you done? Ready to get out of here? It's cold.
Bye, guys.
No, it was a good talk.
No, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I really want to do that road trip.
Oh, no, I'm down.
Although he didn't rent me a car to take me to Nico. I was begging. I was like...
No. Hey, you know what? We can still do that in January.
Okay.
Oh, no, like getting a car and stuff like that.
What are we loading?
Oh, no, don't worry about it. I'm just going to leave everything. I'm just going to drive it.
Okay.
I'm going to go and see what they're doing at...
Power vehicles or something?
No. On there? Oh, no, they're at Minami. I don't know. They fucked up the front end, so I think they're trying to fix some of the arms so it's actually drivable so they can put it on the loader or something like that. So.
Okay. This is a question, since you keep saying you're an old man. Did you run a GoPro this weekend? So you don't have any GoPro information on this car or data to see how it handled and how your handwork was or anything?
No, my son took a little video.
Yeah.
When I gave him a ride along. That's about it.
Okay, I'm just checking. You're talking about you want to live in the future, and then you're still not doing it.
I don't. That's why. That's why I got out of it.
Yeah.
Because it's too much for me.
Yeah. No, I understand.
So that's why I tell everybody else to do it, because it's easier to just tell them it's easier to say it, but it's so much hard work. I mean, just posting something on Instagram daily is already a pain in the ass for me. Really, like it's true.
I'm bringing an entire media guy with me internationally just to do a joke YouTube channel.
No, but it's hard work. Like, it's not. When people see it, they're like, "Oh yeah, these guys just go around and do this stuff." It's like, man, it's a lot. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of stuff. You have to come up with the idea. You have to set it up. I mean, somebody's got to pay for things, and I know,
which means it's a whole nother layer of working with sponsors and all that stuff. Nothing is as easy as it seems.
Nothing.
Delivering
the
everything.
only thing that's easy is sitting at home and not doing shit. That's easy.
And if you don't have expensive taste,
there's another guy.
Hey, look! There you go. It's YouTubing convention. Now he's running away from the camera.
Well, I mean, it's your interview.
No, we're already done.
Yeah, we're done.
Yeah.
No, but seriously, it's look at, I mean, this guy's holding 2 lights here, it's just hard work. I mean, just finding
good
things.
job.
So, but I really think
put that light down. He's gonna expect
sometimes
dinner.
I mean, you can't take it for granted. Like I barely look at things online, which I should be looking more, but then it's like you kind of flip through and you see something and you're like, oh yeah, cool, but then you kind of got to see the behind the scene things, because these guys are actually like this guy on the other side, he's been sitting here just not talking and holding the camera and looking at our ugly faces this whole time, but it's a lot of work.
He literally eats every day.
Yeah, you have to eat,
Yeah.
You have to poop, and yeah, so you got to appreciate all that. I guess use all the tools that you have.
We're trying
to do stuff. Yeah.
I wish we were better at it. We're sitting here with handheld lights and stuff, but all right, get out of here. Look, he has an amp in there. That's not a real drift car. Yeah. Oh God, my teeth. All right, this is the end of Matsuri Night Sai. Thank you so much to Robbie Nishida for talking to us again. His last interview was great. I hope this one goes really well with the audience too. Thank you very much for watching, everybody. Especially since it's
cut it up so it sounds good. It makes me look good, okay?
You already
always look good.
Yeah. You're so polite. Your last interview was so polite. He comes off he comes off very intelligent and everything, and he cares about everything. He's passionate, which is great. I really enjoy that. Okay, thank you everybody. Let's go eat.
Let's go eat.
Bye.